Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asto Tarasata Sri Sri Mad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai.
Jai.
Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai.
Jai.
Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories
Hari
to
Hari
Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this beautiful Tuesday morning and our continuing of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the first canto, the 12th chapter, and today's text is number 4. Sutta Uvacha Apipala Dharma Raja Pitrivad Ranjayan Prajaha Nispriha Sarvakamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya. Sutta Uvacha Apipila Dharma Raja Pitrivad Ranjayan Prajaha Nispriha Sarvakamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya. Sutta Uvacha Apipila Dharma Raja Pitrivad Ranjayan Prajaha Nispriha Sarvakamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Apipalad Dharmaraja Pitravadrajayan Prajaha Nihishparsha Sarvakamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya.
Hare Krishna. Sutta Uvacha Apipalad Dharma Raja Pitrivad Rajayan Praja Nispriha Sarva Kamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya. Hare Krishna.
Sutta Uvacha Apipala Dharma Raja Pitravad Rajayan Praja Nispriha Sarvakamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya.
Sutta Uvacha Apipala Dharma Raja Pitravad Ranjayan Praja Nispraha Sarva Kamebhya Krishna Padanu Sevaya.
Hare Krishna. Shruta Uvacha Apipala Dharma Rajaha Pitravadranjayam prajaha Nishpriha Sharva Kamebhya Krishna Padanu Hare.
Anyone else? Okay. Sutta Uvacha. Sri Sutta Goswami said, Apipalat administered prosperity. Dharma Raja, King Yudhishthira. Pitrivat, exactly like his father. Ranjayan, pleasing. Prajaha, all those who took birth. Nispriyaha, without personal ambition. Sarva, all. Kamebhya, from sense gratification. Krishna Pada, the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. Anusevaya, by dint of rendering continuous service. Translation. Sri Sutta Goswami said, Emperor Yudhishthira administered generously to everyone during his reign. He was exactly like his father. He had no personal ambition and was freed from all sorts of sense gratification because of his continuous service unto the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As mentioned in our introduction, quote, there is a need for the science of Krishna in human society for all the suffering humanity of the world, and we simply request the leading personalities of all nations to take to the science of Krishna for their own good, for the good of society, and for the good of all the people of the world, end quote. So it is confirmed herein by the example of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the personality of goodness. In India, the people hanker after Ramarajya because the personality of Godhead was the ideal king, and all other kings or emperors in India controlled the destiny of the world for the prosperity of every living being who took birth on the earth. Herein, the word prajaha is significant. The etymological import of the word is that which is born. On the earth, there are many species of life, from the aquatics up to the perfect human beings, and all are known as prajas. Lord Brahma, the creator of this particular universe, is known as the Prajapati because he is the grandfather of all who have taken birth. Thus, praja is used in a broader sense than it is now used. The king represents all living beings, the aquatics, plants, trees, reptiles, birds, animals, and man. Every one of them is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And the king, being the representative of the Supreme Lord, is duty bound to give proper protection to every one of them. This is not the case with the presidents and dictators of this demoralized system of administration, where the lower animals are given no protection, while the higher animals are given so-called protection. But this is a great science which can be learned only by one who knows the science of Krishna. By knowing the science of Krishna, one can become the most perfect man in the world. And unless one has knowledge in this science, all qualifications and doctorate diplomas acquired by academic education are spoiled and useless. Maharaj Yudhishthira knew this science of Krishna very well, for it is stated here that by continuous cultivation of this science, or by continuous devotional service to Lord Krishna, he acquired the qualification of administering the state. The father is sometimes seemingly cruel to the son, but that does not mean that the father has lost the qualification to be a father. A father is always a father because he always has the good of the son at heart. The father wants every one of his sons to become a better man than himself. Therefore, a king like Maharaj Yudhishthir, who was the personality of goodness, wanted everyone under his administration, especially human beings who have better developed consciousness, to become devotees of Lord Krishna, so that everyone can become free from the trifles of material existence. His motto of administration was all good for the citizens. For as personified goodness, he knew perfectly well what is actually good for them. He conducted the administration on that principle, and not on the Rakshashi demonic principle of sense gratification. As an ideal king, he had no personal ambition, and there was no place for sense gratification because all his senses at all times were engaged in the loving service of the Supreme Lord, which includes the partial service to the living beings, who form the parts and parcels of the complete whole. Those who are busy rendering service to the parts and parcels, leaving aside the whole, only spoil time and energy, as one does when watering the leaves of a tree without watering the root. If water is poured on the root, the leaves are enlivened perfectly and automatically. But if water is poured on the leaves only, the whole energy is spoiled. Maharaj Yudhishthir, therefore, was constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, and thus the parts and parcels of the Lord, the living beings under his careful administration, were perfectly attended with all comforts in this life and all progress in the next. That is the way of perfect management of state administration. Translation again, Sutta Goswami said, Sri Sutta Goswami said, Emperor Yudhishthir administered generously to everyone during his reign. He was exactly like his father. He had no personal ambition and was freed from all sorts of sense gratification because of his continuous service unto the lotus feet of the Lord Sri Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminate Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunya Badi Paschatya Deshitarne Om Ajnana Timiranda Syajnana Nijnana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Trubhishcha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, today's verse talks about administration. Normally, I like to focus on one specific lesson that we can dissect, analyze, and try to walk away with some sort of practical application. But today it looks like I'm going to do something a little differently. I'm going to cover a few things, but I'll try to do it in such a way so it doesn't seem cluttered. So I see that most of the attendees on today's Zoom session are quite regular with these classes. So you have an advantage because today I'm going to talk about a few of the topics that I normally repeatedly talk about. Generally when I speak, there are a few topics that I'll kind of repeat over and over and over again. Today I'm going to try to talk about a few of those, and just to show how how they all work together, right? Because sometimes when I speak on these, they're seemingly obscure topics sometimes. And sometimes it's, even though there's examples given, sometimes it's a little difficult to relate to our personal lives. So today I'm going to try to sort of present all of them in a way that has hopefully a link that we can all sort of follow and maybe understand these points a little better. So, as you may recall, one of the topics I frequently speak on, especially when there's discussion of the universal form, the cosmic manifestation, the three aspects of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, the two types of devotional service, two types of bhakti, regulative and spontaneous, overcoming material nature. Anytime I speak on any of those topics, I mention something that might seem strange to some of you, but it's an important building block to our spiritual progress. So normally I'll give some sort of explanation and a personal example. One example I gave was when I used to be a race car driver and how that helped me become more attentive with my japa. Another example I gave one time was about an online game that I used to play. I was kind of addicted to it. And that actually helped me deepen my appreciation for sadhu sangha. So here are, a few examples of things that I talked about. And so usually, after giving an explanation and an example, I'll say something like this, and this is where the seemingly strange part comes in. I'll say something like, the very things that bind us to this material world, if used properly, can become the instruments that help liberate us from it, right? So the very things that bind us to this material world, things that we have attachments to, that bind us to this material world, can be the exact same things that help liberate us from the material world. Now, it seems strange because how can something that is binding you to the material world free you from that exact bondage, right? And so, like I said, it seems strange. But it's actually, philosophically, it's the building blocks of our philosophy. Aside from reading statements from Srila Prabhupada talking about how, when one becomes Krishna conscious, or one starts to become Krishna conscious, all one has to do is, you do whatever you're doing, you just do it for Krishna instead. That Srila Prabhupada would say this often. You don't have to change anything except for now, instead of, doing it for whatever reason you're doing it for sense gratification, whatever, you do it for Krishna. So, we've read statements like this, and then also philosophically, we can really break it down, because since everything that's in existence, everything that exists is nothing but Krishna's energy, it's all part of Krishna. Being attracted to or attached to anything isn't actually the true problem, right? It's natural to be attracted to and attached to Krishna. He's all attractive, right? But the problem is, so it's not that we're attracted to these things. The problem is that we've formed a disconnect. We've separated these attractive qualities of Krishna from Krishna himself, right? And so we're trying to enjoy them in a separate way, independent from him. We're trying to be independent controllers and enjoyers of Krishna's qualities without acknowledging Krishna himself, right? And so that's what the problem is. It's not being attracted to different things in material nature. That's not the problem. The problem is how we are attracted to it and what we do with that attraction. Seeing it in a very self-centric way instead of a God-centric way. And so this is what Srila Prabhupada preached, that Krishna consciousness just means that we change our consciousness from self-conscious to Krishna conscious. So philosophically, we can see how this can work, right? Nothing that exists is apart from Krishna. Everything is a part of Krishna, right? And so what we really need to focus on is that consciousness, right? So each of us naturally has attraction to specific things, right? We all have different conditioning. Some people are attracted to, rocks and minerals, right? Some people are really attracted to their collection of bottle caps that they have. Some people focus on entertainment things like sports or, whatever. Everyone has, the point is everyone has unique things that they're just spontaneously attracted to. They wake up and they think about it, right? And this is, just something that, they're attached to. And so our science is to take those things that we're naturally attracted to, right? Analyze what it is about those things that we appreciate, what it is about these things that we're naturally attracted to that we appreciate, right? And then learning to see the value in them in their original context, right, of qualities of Krishna, right? So then, instead of continuing to gratify our senses, we see these things that we're attracted to in a new light, and we use them properly, as long as they're favorable to our service. So, for example, I'll try to give an extreme example, one that's normally outside the purview of what one would consider Krishna consciousness, because sometimes extreme examples are needed to show that really anything can be used in Krishna service. So I'll talk about a little bit about intoxication, right? I come from a long line, big family of alcoholics, uncles, cousins, grandparents, even of my brothers, but they're passed now, but a long line of alcoholics, right? And the thing about alcoholics, they're addicted to alcohol, obviously, is that not all alcoholics are the same. There's different reasons that people are attracted to and attached to alcohol. For some people, they're trying to escape something that happened to them, either physical pain, mental anguish, emotional, suffering that they've had. So for some, they're trying to escape something. Yeah. For others, it's just a matter of some scars, from a cultural standpoint, the way they were brought up. Anytime there was some sort of celebration, there was alcohol. Anytime you're having a bad day, there's alcohol. It helps you, process what happened in your day. Anytime, basically there's all these different milestones in life that happen, where alcohol was just part of the equation. So for some people, it's just actually like a cultural thing that they've inherited in their family or society, that just means, if you need to loosen up a little bit, this is what you need to do, right? You need to drink alcohol. So there's many different reasons why people are attracted to alcohol. So no matter what the reason for that attraction, and this goes for anything, not just attachment to alcohol, but attachment to anything, we have to identify what our reason is, that what we value in that. What are we appreciating about this particular thing? So that's the first step, is to figure out what it is about that we appreciate. And so let's say for someone, so one of my brothers who was an alcoholic was also homeless for a period of time. And so for him, alcohol was basically his shelter, right? It helped keep him warm. And it also, he was one of the ones that had to try to forget a lot of past trauma that he went through. So, but nonetheless, it was shelter. It was like warmth and shelter. It protected him from the, harsh realities of the world. And so, and Srila Prabhupada actually came across many people like this in the early days, when he was preaching on Bowery. There would be drunks all the time, in the doorway that he had to go to get to his apartment. And he would say to them, he would quote this verse, Rasoham apsukonteya, that Krishna is the taste in that alcohol. Whatever this drunkard is appreciating in that alcohol, it's actually just one of Krishna's qualities. So when an alcoholic is, doing their thing and drinking alcohol, if they acknowledge that shelter that they're getting, that thing that they appreciate that they're getting, is actually one of Krishna's qualities, right? And they appreciate it as such in that way, and they make that distinction in their mind. Just having that appreciation put in the right place, not I like how this makes me feel, but I like how God put this quality into this thing that I very much am attracted to or attached to, right? Acknowledging that. Just doing that, Krishna then helps supply us with further intelligence so that we can continue on our devotional path, right? So anything we're attracted to can be used in Krishna service. So first, we see the thing that we're naturally attracted to, things that we deal with on a daily basis, no matter what the circumstance, we are going to be doing this, right? figure out what it is about that we appreciate, because people appreciate the same exact thing for very different reasons. So we want to figure out exactly what it is we appreciate about these things, and then see how it's a quality of Krishna. Then the thing itself doesn't necessarily have to be maintained. Like, so in the case of alcohol, we don't keep drinking and keep appreciating Krishna in that drink. We find that shelter, whatever we're looking for there. We find that quality of Krishna in another aspect of Krishna's energy, right? Because some things now are no longer favorable to devotional service. In the beginning, anything can be favorable in devotional service. Krishna made sure of that. Krishna, he made the Vedas. They're so broad. There's Sattvic Puranas, which we like the Amala Purana. But there are also Tamasic Puranas, Puranas that will attract people who are in the much lower modes. So it has to go down and talk about sense gratification and different ways to engage in sense gratification to enjoy it better, right? But if you're following those rules in the Vedas, even though your intention might be to just enjoy better, since you're following Krishna's rules in the Vedas, gradually you will become purified of that and start appreciating Krishna. That's what the Vedas are meant to do, right? And so this is just the general formula there. So this is the thing I talk about. So one thing, me personally, that I've naturally been focusing on since as long as I can remember, honestly, definitely before I was a teenager, I can definitely remember pondering these things when I was like 10, 11 years old, but probably even before that, because sometimes I look at photos when I'm a child and, there's all sorts of, everyone around me is, just having sort of like a good time laughing. And I have this very pensive look on my face, like I'm just in deep thought, right? And there's several examples of this for me. So probably even before I can remember thinking about these things, I was thinking about these things. And that's basically ever since I was young, I realized that the way this world is run, it's not right. It's something's wrong with the way that this world is. And so I'd sit there and I'd wonder, why do people exploit one another? Why do laws work differently for different people? It's not like one law and then it works the same for everybody. It depends on the situation. And I thought, why is it that we can stand by and we seem to be comfortable seeing the suffering of others when we could very easily do something to help that person's suffering? All these different things that I observed when I was young, and it didn't make sense to me. It didn't seem fair, right? And so this is my conditioning, right? Everybody has their own conditioning. So this is my conditioning. And so this was a big part of my paradigm. I was trying to figure out why the world is so unfair. And I was trying to figure out what I could do about it to try to change it, right? So fast forward several years later, when I finally encounter the devotees and I start reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And so when I would come upon a purport like today's purport, I was so attracted to it because, it's talking about the exact things that I would meditate on before I even came across devotees. Why the system isn't run properly and wondering how it could be run properly, right? And so sometimes when Srila Prabhupada, anytime he talks about administration, he'll do this. He'll talk about what a proper administration is, the Vedic plan, the way Krishna laid out for us to properly administer. And then he'll talk about the current system that we have, which is quite ineffectual, right? And sometimes he'll go into, much more detail. And when I get to those purports, I relish them so much. But this is the thing. So this is a thing that I was naturally attracted to, right? So this is another example of, whatever you're into. So I was just this punk kid who didn't appreciate authority. They weren't actually authorized, so you wouldn't really call them authority, but people who were holding positions of authority. And I was able to, because the way Srila Prabhupada presented, I was able to take that nature of mine and make it from a self-centric thing of, of just questioning every single authority out there and becoming eventually a bitter old man, I was able to understand, okay, what's actually going on, right? Because when Srila Prabhupada's talking about this, he's talking about, what's the proper way to govern, and then what's the improper way. But he's not doing so, he's not stating an opinion, right? He's not just this fellow who has a particular political affiliation and he's very much against any other political affiliation. So he's complaining about one and glorifying another. No, he's presenting this in a scientific way that anyone can be able to appreciate. He's talking about, and I'm realizing that the time is ticking away and I'm nowhere near where I wanted to be at this point in time, but I'm going to try to get this covered. So essentially, administration is there. And this is another thing I talk about. I talk about principles and details. The principles are far more important than the details. So there are details of administration, meaning administration means that the people in these positions, they enforce laws. Sometimes they have to make new laws, but then they make and enforce laws. That's what administration does. So the way that Krishna designed it, there are the three modes of material nature. There are qualities that we have due to our attraction to these modes of natures. And those qualities determine what sort of occupation we should engage in, right? So those who are in the mode of goodness, they're brahmanas, they study Shastra, and they pretty much just preach Shastra. Anytime anyone comes to them for advice, they give that advice based on Shastra, and they're detached. If the person follows the advice, okay. If they don't, whatever. All a brahmana does is repeat what Shastra says, right? So they study Shastra and repeat Shastra, and they're not attached in any way of how it's applied then after that. What people do with it, that's up to them. Now, a kshatriya, they have a bit of passion, so they do care if people follow their advice or not. Kshatriya, the word kshatriya, kshat means hurt, kshat, hurt, and triya comes from trayate, which means to liberate. So kshatriya means one who delivers others from harm. So they're natural protectors, yeah? A kshatriya will naturally want to give protection. And today's verse is talking about that. Maharaj Yudhishthira is just like his father, who's Dharmaraj. So he understands what is to be done, and he wants the benefit of everyone, the welfare for all. That was his motto. And so he would go out of his way to give protection to all of the praja, not just the people, but all of the animals, anything that took birth, plants, animals, aquatics, all of it, right? And so this is what a true kshatriya is. If you are not a true kshatriya, in other words, if your nature isn't to protect, then you should not be in a position of administration, right? So like I said, the administration, the details of that post are making and enforcing laws. If you have, for example, someone who's, instead of having the qualities of a kshatriya, if they have the qualities of a vaishya, they'll still follow the details of making and enforcing laws. But they're doing so with a very different intent. So the kshatriyas do it to protect the citizens. The vaishyas, they do it if it's profitable, because the vaishyas, their mentality is trying to make something out of nothing. Sometimes it's trade, but usually it's profit, right? So if you have someone who is of a vaishya nature or lower in a position of a kshatriya, then sure, you will still have laws being made and enforced, but they won't be to protect the citizens, they will be to make profit. So if a law, even though it's proper, isn't going to make profit, if it's not profitable, they will not make the law. And we've seen so many examples of this in Western so-called culture. You don't want to call it culture because there's nothing really positive about what the West has done, we are very much unfair when it comes to law and order. This is seen in any case. One example I'll just give and I, by the way, have no political affiliation. I support Maharaj Yudhishthir. The example I'm going to give might show a leaning toward one way or another, but I guarantee it doesn't. I see no value in either of the political parties. Obviously there's some value in each of them, but as a whole, I see no value in them. But an example of laws being made and enforced because of profit, not because of protection, is we have an environmental system that's been going on for quite some time. And so some people have noticed that, because of the mass consumption of fossil fuels and the way that we waste things, the climate is changing. And the way to sort of fix that would be to make certain regulations. And that's within the purview of law and order. If something's going on with the world, you can do something to prevent it, help fix it, right? But politicians are actually supported and paid by big companies like these oil companies, right? They're given money to make sure that the oil companies can continue to make their money, right? And so they pay politicians to make sure that whatever laws come up don't interfere with their business plan. And so instead of laws being made and enforced to protect all of the citizens, laws are being withheld because otherwise profit wouldn't be made. And there's so many examples of this. Back in the day, not too recent in our history of a nation, slavery was legal. You couldn't vote unless you were a white man who owned a certain amount of property. That's what gave you human rights. Anything before that, the people who lived here before, the people that are native to this land, they weren't considered humans. They were considered savages. The imported workers that we brought over to do, to do the labor for us so that we could become rich, we didn't consider them humans. All laws were made and enforced just because of profit. If it was profitable, it would be maintained. If not, so unless there's an actual kshatriya in the position of administration, then it cannot work. It will fail, right? This is just how it works. This is scientific. If someone is more focused on profit than they are on protection, it will not be a proper administration. And the unfortunate thing is that a true kshatriya would not get elected into this current system, right? They'd either be labeled too extreme or too inexperienced. So either they'd say, okay, well, these are the principles I'm going to run on. And so people would say, oh, well, that's just too extreme, right? If a true kshatriya actually laid out their political platform, they would be called too extreme. And then they would be asked, when there's debates, they'd say, okay, well, sure, you want to do this and you want to do that, but how are you going to deal with the lobbyists, or how is this going to affect the debt, the national debt, things like that? And they would say, I'm not concerned with this. I'm concerned with running things properly, making laws because they're the proper thing to do, not because they're profitable. So then they would be labeled as inexperienced. Oh, well, then you don't know how to work the system, right? So there's no way a true kshatriya could ever even be brought into this system, because neither the Democratic nor the Republican parties would allow such a candidate to then come to that, to that position where they could become elected. And it's just as simple as that. So, and this also reminds me, and this is another thing I talk about from time to time, of Bhumi Gita. There are all these kings, these powerful kings throughout history, and they're trying to make an impact on society. And even if they're so successful that generations beyond them, they train their children and grandchildren in such a way that just for generations their empire is able to, their dynasty is able to thrive. to Mother Bhumi, it's just a blink of an eye, and it was all just a waste. It was all for naught. All of this effort to make a name for ourselves, or to, you know, enjoy anything that we're doing, to try to enjoy separately from Krishna, it's all just the blink of an eye. So when Srila Prabhupada was talking about that in his purport today, that Maharaj Yudhishthira, he didn't focus on sense gratification. He did serve all of the people because they were part and parcels of Krishna, but he didn't do so in such a way that tried to cultivate the sense gratification. He focused on the real issues. You know, he gave them protection, but it wasn't just material protection. It was protection from, you know, the dangers of the material world. So, and anytime I talk about Bhumi Gita, it's funny because, you know, we sort of want to make an impact. You know, we want to make a difference in this world. You know, we want our examples to shine through and inspire and encourage people to do, you know, the right thing. We want, you know, songs to be written about us and sung, and the memory will always, you know, live on. But the thing is with, you know, news these days is we don't bad news travels fast, right? Good news doesn't really get around. You know, we don't really have many, you can't really recall many names of genuine heroes, right? But we all know the names Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, Kim Jong-un, Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson, Lee Harvey Oswald. I could go on for days listing people who've done like historically heinous stuff, right? We know those names. We can't make a list that big of people who've done heroic things. It's not that they don't exist. They have existed, and they've done wonderful things. It's just that's not the news that gets around, that people remember, right? So trying to make a positive impact in this world, if we're not actually doing that in service to Krishna, then it's a complete waste. Like Srila Prabhupada also mentioned in the purport, all these, you know, we can go and acquire all this academic wisdom. We can get doctorate after doctorate after doctorate after doctorate, but it's all a waste unless we're actually using whatever we have to serve Krishna and to encourage others also to serve Krishna, right? So, oh man, there was so much that I was going to talk about, and we're running out of time, and I want to wrap this up because, you know, I always like to say, you know, what does this mean for us? Because all we talked about was that so far was that the way the system works, you know, it's not the proper way, and it can't work, right? So what does that mean for us? Does that mean that, you know, we can't be Krishna conscious until there's a proper Krishna conscious Kshatriya leader? You know, so we'll just sit back and relax and wait until that happens, until, you know, the Rama Rajya comes back and saves us? No, that's not what it means, right? Because we have a spiritual warrior who came and who lifted each of us out of our respective gutters. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada, with his teachings, he gave us everything we need to know to escape this material world, to not be distracted by all of these things that are, you know, that are coming up around us at all times. So we don't have to wait for that. But there still is a lesson in all of this, you know. Just because there's not really a hope of us having a proper Kshatriya leader of our nation, it doesn't mean that this concept can't apply to us. First of all, we can appreciate the scientific presentation of this, and we can understand why the world is going the way it is, and why it's useless to try to play by their rules, right? To try to sort of change that system by entering that system without actually making that connection with Krishna. It's useless if we don't do that. And so it shows us, verses like this today and purports like this shows us what we should be focusing on, right? Because no matter what we do materially, no matter how much we accumulate, it doesn't matter if it's wealth or strength or fame or knowledge, nothing can truly help us out of our problem aside from cultivating Krishna consciousness. Yeah, because then we can actually escape the world. So verses like today and purports like today can show us where we should be focusing our attention, but it also shows us, if we understand, okay, this is the nature of a kshatriya is to protect. So anyone that's in any administrative or managerial position should have this quality of, wanting to protect others. So that means by using this information, we can choose a worthy person to take shelter of in that capacity, someone that is worthy to actually manage us, so we know, okay, they have protection, they have our best interest in mind, so this is a proper leader that I can get behind. Just on a very small scale, any sort of manager, anyone, or a counselor, for example. Now, a counselor, we would look for different things. So a manager means kshatriya, counselor means brahmana. So for a counselor, we want someone that's going to give us shastra no matter what. They're just going to present to us based on shastra what we should do, and they won't be attached whether we follow it or not, right? That's who we go to for advice. Someone that's just going to give us, okay, here's what the situation is. They present it in a scientific way. If you do this, it'll work like this. If you don't, it'll keep making a problem like that. And so you do what you do, right? So that's who we go to for advice. If we're under the care of someone for management, we want to make sure that they are protectors. It also helps us figure out what our nature is so that we can engage in a proper service for us, right? These are all things that we can learn from today's verse. And there's a lot there, a lot more I wanted to get into, but I think I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or comments, because it's definitely beyond that time. Anyway, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And if there are any questions, comments, additions, reflections, please unmute yourselves. This is a thing that I could talk about nonstop for weeks. Again, and this was all about using your conditioning. So my conditioning was that I was dissatisfied with the way that the world works. Now, it turns out that the reason I was dissatisfied is because I'm a spirit soul living in a temporary, eternal spirit soul living in a temporary situation. So how could there be happiness? How could it run properly? Yeah. But it wasn't until I read Srila Prabhupada's books that I was able to make that connection. Is there really there's nothing? No discussion? Okay.
Ramsham Prabhu has his hand up.
There you go.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramsham.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I'll to start Guru Maharaj. So, yeah, Prabhuji, the session was really wonderful because you practically mentioned what happened with you, with your family members, how was the sense gratification I mentioned in the translation, and this verse indicates. So, you, as you said, your brother was, the past times you mentioned how he was addicted and, those all things. So this really, the personal realizations, it really helps to understand how we can get rid of that, So it's a really wonderful project. Very nicely you mentioned. And also you talked about the administration as, like Yudhishthira Maharaj was doing the proper administration. So that's really wonderful project. I do not have question. I want to just comment on that.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
It's all sinking in. There was just a lot, and the only thing I can say is I wish you could complete all the things you wanted to talk about, because I'm very curious. I really would like to know, what other things you would have wanted to say. But, like you always say, what is it? how is it we can use what we have learned this morning in class? And I'm just trying to think for myself where and how I could apply. And I'm not going to think about it in that big global picture that you were talking about. I'm even in my small world, in my small portion of the world that I am trying to work at the temple, those qualities, how we should go about handling the business of the temple. There needs to be a Kshatriya commander who is going to enforce whatever it is we decide upon doing. But then we need somebody who can see the big picture and come up with those rules. And the system that you're talking about that Yudhishthir Maharaj had, he had Brahmanas telling him what to come up with. That was the way, that Ramarajya worked, because Rama did not just say, okay, these are the rules I have decided on. He had Vishwamitra, he had Vasishtha Muni, he had those Brahmanas telling him how to do it.
Right.
And like you were saying, I'm not sure if the present world is ready for that kind of a system. It should be, because that is the science, and we know it will work. But in our own small world, I think we should figure out a way to make it happen. The temple administration gets guided by somebody who has studied how these things should be done, because it's not possible for everybody to be able to do everything. Definitely,
Right.
I know for me, there is a very narrow section that I am capable of doing. And there's just a lot of things I'm not capable of doing. So it's best I do what I am good at and leave the rest to, others who are good at it.
Right.
And I think that would be the practical application of this verse.
Yeah, that's definitely one. One thing that it's not commonly known, but it's a very important thing, is that when you have a society community, a person who is a manager cannot also be a counselor, because it's a conflict of interest. And oftentimes we see in ISKCON's model, due to being short-staffed, because it's not that a person who is a manager cannot also counsel, it's just that you can't do both jobs simultaneously. If you're a manager, you need to make sure everything gets done, right? So say, for example, you are a manager and someone comes to you for counsel, and someone's saying, Prabhu, I think that the service that I'm doing, I don't think it quite matches my nature, right? So a counselor would have to empathize with that, and they would give a different. So a manager would say, look, it's true, I understand. Could you possibly just try to continue doing this service for at least a certain amount of time until I can figure out another person to do it? And then I will absolutely, they have the right mood, but they also have to do it in a practical way, because otherwise things stop happening. What does the manager just start doing everything that people think aren't their nature, right? But a counselor, will say, okay, yeah, no, if you're doing something that's against your nature, then we have to absolutely do something about that. So both are doing the same thing. They're doing something about that problem, but they're solving it in a different way, because one, you have to pay more attention to the logistics of it all, and so it just takes a little bit more time. And the other one is just focusing on the matter, right? And you can't do both. So either if you're more Brahminical, and if you're a leader, if you're more Brahminical, you're going to actually tend to just do all of the services that nobody wants to do. And I've seen that. I've seen temple managers just doing all of the service that nobody wants to do, right? But management also means that, especially, we're devotees. There's always emergency situations where, not every service that we do is going to be according to our nature. Sometimes, because we are bhaktas, we're servants of Krishna, we see that something just needs to be done, and maybe it's not our nature, but it needs to be done. So, and it's, and of course there's always it's better to do your own duty, but sometimes it is our duty, you know, like floors need to be swept.
Mm.
That's not something that, you know,
Mm.
that we're disqualified from doing because of our quality. Anybody can sweep a floor. We see that, you know, the king swept in front of the wrath cart.
Mhm.
There are situations where anyone would sweep. It's not just a, you know,
Mm.
it's so you were living in Krishna's temple. Sometimes we have to do these things. So sometimes management means, you know, not every single service you do will be according to your nature, but each of these services needs to be done.
Mm.
And so, you know, you have to do like that. So there's, but yeah, it just doesn't work. If you try to do both simultaneously, it can't work. You manage and counsel a person.
Yeah.
Go look under Priya Mata. You have your hand up.
I was just touching on the point you made about whatever addiction you have, then you can just use it in Krishna's service.
Mhm.
You know, like dovetail it in Krishna's service. I'm thinking that some people are addicted, you know, just to so many like watching movies.
Mm.
Some are addicted to to eat a lot.
Right.
And how do you practically
Thank you for
use
that
all
question.
this addiction in Krishna service? Because we know when we're overeating, we're not supposed, for spiritual life, you're not supposed to overeat. But we
Yes.
still have this addiction, addicted, to eat so
Okay.
much.
Yes, thank you for that question. That's a very important one. So our tendency is, you know, as aspiring Vaishnavas, our tendency is to try to focus on whatever positive service we can do, or hearing and chanting, and we try to hide the other things, the other aspects of our lives that we haven't connected with Krishna, right? We're still attracted and we still do them, but we try to hide them. We try to suppress them in some way because they're bad. They're keeping us away from Krishna service, right? And so this doesn't really help us in our devotional growth. Doing the other things, you know, connected to Krishna, that helps us. But trying to hide other things or being ashamed of other things, and not actually dealing with them, that doesn't help spiritual growth. So the examples you gave, some people, you know, are addicted to movies, entertainment, and some are addicted to eating. So as I mentioned, so first you identify what it is that you're addicted to. So if it's movies or eating, good. Then it's what it is about those things that is attractive to you, what it is that you appreciate about those things. So some people overeat for different reasons. Some people, because it's an emotional thing, they just eat when they're emotional. Some people do it because it's comfort. Some people actually overeat because they lived in a society. I know some people that lived in some of the poorer parts of Europe where if there was food on the table, you would eat it immediately because you didn't know if there was going to be food the next day. So there's different reasons why people do these different things. So once you identify that reason, what you appreciate about eating or being mindlessly entertained in the case of watching movies, when you find out what it is that you appreciate about it, then through, you know, reading the descriptions of the cosmic manifestation, universal form, Krishna's Brahman feature, you'll actually see that quality comes from Krishna. And so if you can appreciate, at least in theory, that, you know, the reason that I take comfort in either overeating or watching movies is because Krishna's potency is in there. And so even though it might not be the right thing for me to do right now, I appreciate that Krishna put that in there so that I can appreciate it. Then it's just you gradually have to take it from, if it's a thing that's actually detrimental, like the case that I was talking about of alcohol, then eventually you just have to find whatever that is, like that shelter, in something else that's more positive. So sometimes you can reject a thing, but initially the thing doesn't need to be rejected. You have to just figure out what about that thing, you know, is attractive to you. Does that make sense? I could say it in a lot of different ways, but sometimes it just doesn't click, right?
Yeah.
But does that make sense? That
Yeah,
whatever
I'm
we're
just-
attracted to about the thing, whatever it is, it's actually coming from Krishna. So if we can at least change our mentality from, I like what this is doing to me, to I appreciate that Krishna, put that in there. And then we can find that in another way. Like the one example I gave was, there was this online game that I would play on my device, and I was addicted to it. I'd be playing, anytime I had the chance, anytime I was in Wi-Fi, I'd be playing. But there was an aspect of the game where you actually had to work with others. It was called an alliance that you had, and you couldn't meet your goals unless you had this alliance. And so what I realized was that, me being attracted to this game, I was attracted to the cooperation of people, to the coming together of people to achieve a goal, right? And so it was a video game, like you talked about watching movies. So I was addicted to a video game, but I saw that, okay, the reason why I'm attracted to this is because of this phenomenon of people coming together and working for a common goal, right? And that's what sadhu sangha is all about. And so what I did was I took that appreciation from appreciating the particular game that I was playing to appreciating that aspect of sadhu sangha. And then I just had a deeper appreciation for Vaishnavas, yeah? Because that's what we do. We help each other, one of us has a problem, another of us, has a solution, but has another problem, and we all help each other. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and we can lean upon each other in that way. And so whatever it may be, eating, but whatever it is, we have to just find what it is about that thing that we appreciate so much. All right. Understand that that's actually Krishna's potency, and then try to find that specific potency of Krishna in something else that may be more healthy. We don't always have to give up the thing, but sometimes if it's detrimental to or not favorable to our service, then we'll give up the specific thing, but we don't give up the thing that we appreciate, because we can't give up the thing we appreciate. We are naturally attracted to it, and there's nothing wrong with being naturally attracted to it. It's just the way we're attracted. If we're doing it because we're appreciating it only in terms of ourselves separate from Krishna, then that's detrimental. But if we do it understanding, oh, okay, this is Krishna's potency that I'm attracted to, and actually the way to properly deal with it, or the way to properly acknowledge it, is to use it in this particular way. And that comes with the clarity of chanting Hare Krishna through Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. All of these things help us, develop in that way, and to understand what we are supposed to do with each of these things. But we definitely don't want to try to ignore or hide necessarily the attachments we have. We just have to figure out how we can use those attachments in Krishna service, because they won't go away. They're natural. It's all part of our conditioning. We can't just pretend they're gone. That's called Falgu Vairagya. It ends up eventually kicking us in the behind, and it shows its face again. So this is a very important thing for us to understand. And it's tough to get. It's tough to get. It's not the easiest thing to grasp, because there are different situations. Acharya Prabhu, I saw you had your hand up. Oh, it looks like he had to log off. That's unfortunate, because I love his input always. So unfortunately we missed out on that. But yeah, Golokananda Priya, did that at least make some theoretical
yes, Prabhu,
sense?
you explain it very nicely, and it makes sense what you're talking about,
Okay. It takes a while to apply it, and sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's difficult for us to understand what it is about the thing that we appreciate. It's hard to separate. Like the one example you gave, eating. Sometimes it's hard for us to understand why it is that we appreciate eating, right? What it is about it. But it's not the eating that we appreciate. It's something about it. Something. I don't know what it is, because for me, food is fuel, and so if I need energy, that's what I take, and that's just my situation. But everyone has their situation. But I can tell you why I was addicted to a video game, and I can tell you why I was addicted to racing cars, and I can tell you why I was addicted to trying to understand why the world just doesn't work the way it should. So, but whatever we're attracted to, that can be used in Krishna service. Absolutely, 100%. There is nothing but Krishna's energy, right? So whatever we're attracted to materially in the wrong way, it's actually attraction to Krishna. It's just not done in the right way. We're attracted to Krishna while trying to take Krishna out of the equation. So we just have to see, okay, this is actually Krishna's energy. This is why I appreciate it. And then we just appreciate it properly instead of, trying to do it independently. That's the model.
Thank you very much for the nice explanation.
Sure. Thank you. That was a very important question. Thanks for asking it. And I'm really bummed that I missed Acharya Prabhu's.
I will send him an email and ask him to ask you. And
send him my regrets too.
Yes.
He probably just wanted to give he likes to give relevant stories of Srila Prabhupada. And
yes.
I was looking forward to it, but
yes.
I also wanted to make sure that I had go look another Priya's thing. So Jai Ganesh, you have your hand up.
Hare Krishna Prabhupada and Vartanamal Srila Prabhupada. This is like follow-up clarification on Mataji's question. You were mentioning about eating more than what is necessary. So, and also you said we don't give up what we appreciate. So in this case, like once we identify the reason for overeating, and then we need to try to dovetail that reason towards Krishna. Is that the correct understanding?
Sort of. Yeah, that's the partial understanding. So we have to figure out what it is about eating, for example, that is attractive to us. Why are we naturally always doing it? It's not because we like putting things in our mouth. It's something's there. I don't know what it is. I wish I did, because then I could explain it very completely. Some people do it for comfort, right? Some people do it like just from things that I've heard. People do it for different reasons. So we have to first identify what it is about eating that attracts us. So if it is comfort, or for some people it's just a reminder of a simpler time back when they were young and their mom would give them tomato soup and a sandwich and they'd feel better. And so that's just some sort of samskar that they have. It could number of things. But once we figure that out, then we just, instead of appreciating what it does for us, we have to appreciate that it's Krishna's quality and start seeing it in that light, right? We see it in that light, then instead of this thing is meant to serve me, this thing is something that I very much appreciate. And the way that it's meant to be properly utilized is this way. And this is what we learn from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, right? And then once we identify that and we see it as Krishna's quality, then we can actually give up overeating, because we can find whatever that is that we found in eating, we can find it somewhere else, because that's the way Krishna's energies are. It's not that you can only feel comfortable if you're eating. No, there's all sorts of other comfort that comes from other things. But the trick is you first have to understand why it is that we're so naturally attracted to this thing, and then understand that know is just for Krishna. So generally, it's easier to follow the example if I can actually. I don't know exactly why people overeat.
Yeah, I get the point, Prabhu. Yeah, thank you.
You get the point. So yeah, it's basically what you said, to dovetail it, but it has to be in a very specific way, because sometimes when we just hear the term dovetail, it just means, well, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, but I'm going to say it's for, or like, say for example, if I'm a carpenter, right, and so I build houses, so now the way to dovetail that is to just build houses for Krishna. So there's ways to do that. I can continue building whether regular houses, but just give some of the profits to Krishna. But if I'm still just building houses because I'm building houses, and then there's just that little part of me that's, appreciating Krishna, that's good, but that's not necessarily dovetailing. Then there's, okay, now whatever I'm building is just going to be directly for Krishna. I'm going to build temples. I'm going to build houses for devotees. I'm going to, that type of thing. And so there's different ways to do that. And it's all about the consciousness. So it's not even, and I want to make this clear before it sounds like, if you're just doing your job and using some of the profits to support Krishna, that's not necessarily worse. It depends on your consciousness. So if your consciousness is, is fully there in serving Krishna, you can do whatever you're doing. You can continue building houses for whoever you want, right? But if your consciousness is that I'm building these houses, I'm doing this work, I'm responsible for the fruits of this labor, and I'm so kind that I'm giving some of these, fruits that I've acquired to Krishna, because that's the pious thing to do. If we think we're the doer and we're helping Krishna out, that's the wrong mentality. So you could be doing the same exact thing. You could still be building houses for other people, but the mentality is, all of this has come from Krishna. The skill has come from Krishna. The materials have come from Krishna. The money that has been given to me by these homeowners, that has also come from Krishna. Nothing is because of my own work. Everything's from Krishna. We have that mentality, and we're just like, Krishna, obviously it's all yours. I'd like to give it all to you, but I also have to maintain myself, and I appreciate the fact that you're allowing me to maintain myself. And so this portion I keep, this portion goes to you. So it's always the mentality. It's not the situation, it's the mentality. So when we say things like dovetail, it could mean a lot of different things. It could mean, like I said, from that gradation, from thinking ourselves the doer and thinking that we're actually doing Krishna a favor by giving him something, to understanding that everything comes from Krishna, and then we're giving him whatever we can. Both of those are dovetailing, but we want to go for that second one, that second example. We want to understand that everything is Krishna's energy. He's given us everything. We can't do a thing on our own. It may look like it sometimes because I'm moving this hand and it has a hammer in it and it's putting that nail in. But no, all of that's because of Krishna. Krishna's potency in the nail to keep it rigid so it doesn't bend over. Krishna's potency in the hammer. Krishna's potency in me. The knowledge that, if I do this, this goes in. All of that is Krishna, and so that's what we're looking for. What we're looking for is to understand things as they are, because everything is Krishna. There's nothing but Krishna. And so our goal is to see things as they are, to see Krishna everywhere. When Prahlad Maharaj was asked by his father, is your Lord in this pillar? Prahlad Maharaj looked over at that pillar and he didn't see a pillar and then theoretically understand that, oh, well, since it's supporting the house, all support comes from Krishna, therefore, yeah, he's there. And he didn't think like that. No, he looked and he saw Krishna. Yeah. It wasn't a theoretical thing for him. He didn't, so this is what we're meant to do. So first, yeah, we're theoretically understanding things and we're trying to apply them. But what we're really trying to do is see Krishna in everything. And that means everything, whatever we're attracted to. Is that?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Yeah.
Makes sense, Jagannath?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. I understand the consciousness is important more than.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, anything else?
Don't see any more hands up. Just very quickly, Prabhu, what other points were you going to make? Just the headlines, if you will. So
there were several. A lot of it was just more of, more really bad examples of how our government, why they make their decisions and why it doesn't work. There was a lot of that. There was also, I was also going to touch on the stepping stone principle, which is a principle that I often speak of when talking about things like varnashram, because we were just talking about varnashram. Because it's not the be all end all, of course, but it is highly beneficial for if we are going to engage in society, we can do it, some whimsical way that people sort of partially agree on these days, or we can follow a system that's actually designed by Krishna to help us get out of, this material world, right? Because a lot of times when we hear terms like varnashram dharma, we think it's outdated, antiquated. We think it's, the caste system, which has been corrupted, and we don't see the value in it. And some devotees, some aspiring devotees, just don't see any importance in ever talking about it. You just do whatever you do for Krishna. It's simple as that. Okay, simple as that. But if you're doing whatever you do for Krishna, then, wouldn't you do what he specifically designed for you to, how to engage in society? It's that sort of thing. So I was going to, touch on that as well. Just a number of things. Basically, it was all of the things that I frequently talk about, but I was going to try to present them in such a way that you see how all of them fit together. Because really, every single thing I talk about, even though it seems like there are a few different ones, it's always principle and detail.
Yes.
Because the principle is always think of Krishna and never forget him.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is a detail that surrounds that, right? Whether it's the stepping stone principle or, figuring out what our material attachments are and, engaging them in all of it. It's all of that. But sometimes if we see all of these things that we, hear multiple times from a person and we sort of understand what they're talking about, but we, like to, sometimes it's nice to see how all of them come together. And, things like that, I guess, really you just need like a seminar where that's the benefit of continual sadhu sangha. It's that we can revisit, certain topics and say, oh, is that what you were talking about when you talk about this? Because honestly, the things I talk about now, it took me decades to be able to understand them to the point that I understand them. And I know that I can understand them even deeper because that's how the process goes. And so these were things that I could previously speak about in theory and give, authoritative quotes from Srila Prabhupada, but I didn't necessarily understand how to apply them. And now I have some idea how to apply. And so, so I try to present it in such a way that will get people from, basically where I was to where I am now. And obviously a lot of people are beyond that, even where I am. But yeah, that's the trick is we have knowledge and we understand it to some extent, but the application, it's a little trickier because even if we understand it in theory and even if we wholeheartedly accept it, sometimes there's just something that's holding us back from realizing it. And that's where the chanting comes in and the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra come in. All important tools. And if we don't use them, we're basically just going to be stuck in a spot that we don't want to be in. And that's what today was talking about. It's talking about if we're not focused on what's important, spiritual life, then we're just going to be distracted and we're going to be doing all these. We're putting forth so much effort. It's not that we're lazy and that's why we're not engaging in Krishna consciousness. We're engaging in so many other things, right? But anything that we're engaging in that's not centered around Krishna consciousness is not going to have any eternal benefit for us. We might be making money, we might be acquiring intelligence, we might be helping people out. We could even become, philanthropists, humanitarians that are, building hospitals, feeding hungry, healing sick people. But if we're not addressing the true problem, of we being eternal spirit souls trapped in a material, temporary place, if we're not addressing that, then all of that, as Srila Prabhupada said in his purport today, it's just a waste. It's and so we hear that over and over and we know it's true, but still we engage in whatever we engage in. That's why I like to focus on this fact that, whatever we're engaging in, that's okay. We can actually use that in Krishna service if we see it in the right way. And, because that's what we do. We tend to fall in this pattern of, okay, the things that I know are connected to Krishna, chanting japa, following the regulative principles, hearing, classes, reading like that, the things that I know are obviously connected, serving the deity, those things I'm going to try to just do more of, and I'm going to try to do less of these things that I'm naturally attracted. It doesn't work. Sometimes it sort of works, but it doesn't really work because we're naturally attracted to it. So we have to figure out why. Why am I naturally attracted to that? Why do I appreciate this so much that every day I'm thinking of it and I'm going to do this, so obviously there's some value that I've assigned to it. But the value is not assigned properly. So now I want to know how to properly assign value to that which I cherish, right? That's what this process is. And so when we do that, when we address our base desires in a healthy way and understand how to actually engage that in Krishna service, then we can actually make progress, and it's much more quick than trying to do it the other way, trying to focus on the things that we, sort of see, because a lot of times we don't even see that connection. Like I said, I mentioned the regulative principles. Sometimes we don't even see that connection. If we think we're just vegetarian, we refrain from intoxications, we don't gamble, and we're not promiscuous. If we think we're those just on their merits, on their material merits, and we don't actually have it connected to Krishna, then we miss the point. And like it's sex, right? Sex outside of marriage, not for the procreation of children. So that shows that it's just basically anything that we would engage in that is pleasurable for us and not engaged in Krishna's service, anything, no matter what it is, that's against principle of Krishna consciousness, be it sex, drinking, eating, whatever, no matter what it is. If we're doing something for our own pleasure, not for Krishna's, then it's outside of Krishna consciousness. That's self-consciousness. So if I'm vegetarian, but I'm eating, just what I want, and maybe, when I buy, like, say, my favorite ice cream, and I'm like, well, I don't have time to put it on, it's going to melt if I put it in the thing and put it on the altar. And so maybe I'll just Sri Vishnu it, or, maybe I won't even do that. Maybe I'm just like, maybe I just meditate on the fact that, oh yeah, this is Krishna's favorite thing, and milk, it's dairy, and, it came from him, and I appreciate, we do all these different things, then justify our desires. But if we're doing that, we're just cheating ourselves, because if it's Krishna's thing, then why wouldn't we offer it to him? Why would we deprive him of that and just, you just say a quick thank you before putting it down our gullet, And so when we focus on the principle, then we can sort of see things more clearly and build upon them, right? And then our process of Krishna consciousness becomes much more dynamic.
Yes.
And so there was just going to be a whole lot more of that, a lot of ranting, because I have a lot to say about the system of government, and it's amazing that people still cling to it. Just looking back in history of how we've treated certain types of people, and it was legal. It wasn't just like, oh, people were treating people that way. No, this was like the accepted thing. No, those aren't really people, they're savages, so we can kill them, take their land, and force them to to give up all of their culture and embrace ours. Or no, it's okay to import employees from another country and force them to work because we paid for them, so they're our property, they're not people. These were all legal things. These were all things that these so-called kshatriyas thought, yeah, no, this is a good idea. This is a good way to make society run properly. And if we look at today, sure, that was hundreds of years ago, but if we look at today, it's not much different. There are still people exploiting one another, and as long as that's the quality of the people in those positions, it's not going to work. We need kshatriyas in these positions, and again, we can't necessarily get that for our nation. But if we at least understand this principle, then we understand who to serve. We understand where to put our priorities, because it's Kali Yuga. We can't fix the world. We can't make it Satya Yuga unless you want to you want to wait a long time. But here's the thing. You don't get into Satya Yuga unless you have the qualification. So you can't even be like, oh, I'll just keep taking birth and then I'll come in the human form of life in Satya Yuga. No, there's unlimited universes. And it's not Kali Yuga in all of them. It's Satya Yuga in some of them, right? So if we're not qualified to get to Satya Yuga, we're not gonna take birth in Satya Yuga. We'll still be in Kali Yuga in another universe, right? And that time it might not be when Lord Chaitanya came, so we'll be super unfortunate. So waiting around is never a good plan. It's never an option. Thinking that no, the only way to solve this problem is we'll wait for a proper kshatriya to become in position, and then we can become Krishna conscious. And that's, we can't do that. If we do that, then, we're the biggest idiots there, that exist. So today's verse and purport, just shows us what we should be focusing on. And since we don't have, a national leader that's keeping us on point with this, thankfully we have Srila Prabhupada who's keeping us on point with this, and the other sadhus, and the Shastra. We have everything we need to get out of this material world. We just have to put forth our effort into those things instead of what we're currently putting forth our effort into. And that's it. That's the process of Krishna consciousness.
Yep. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the long rant. It would have even been longer, but I will leave you all to it. I've taken enough of your
We're
time.
given what we need at any given moment. So this was Krishna's will, and so that's what we got.
Okay.
Thank you again, and glad to see you back on the screen in your natural alignment. This evening we have His Grace Gaurang Prabhu coming to the temple. So everybody who is still on, please try your best to come to the temple. 6:30 is Aarti and 7 o'clock is the lecture. So hope to see all of you there. It should be on Zoom, Prabhu, if you are able to get on and listen.
Okay, I'll see if I have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I'm back in the driveway, so I can only get Wi-Fi sometimes.
Yeah.
But
thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai.